stretched from bank to bank, thick in places, thin and treacherous in others, groaning softly as the current pressed beneath it. Lone Wolf walked alone, his breath rising in slow clouds, his senses alert to every sound. He had come out before sunrise to check the traps and read the land, but something uneasy tugged at him, guiding his steps downstream, where the cottonwoods bent like old men against the cold. That was when he saw her. At first he thought she was driftwood, caught in the ice at a bend where the water slowed. Then he saw the pale curve of a face beneath a dusting of snow, strands of light hair frozen into the surface like trapped sunlight. His heart struck hard against his ribs. He dropped to his knees and tested the ice with his knife. It cracked sharply, sending spiderweb lines across the surface. The river answered with a low, angry sound, but he did not stop. He broke the ice apart with bare hands that burned instantly, dragging her free and onto the bank. She was cold beyond anything he had ever touched. Her skin blue-white, her body frighteningly still. Her dress clung to her, heavy with frozen water, and beneath it her belly was round and unmistakable, pregnant, lone. Wolf pressed his ear to her chest, counting the long seconds until a faint, stubborn heartbeat reached him. Relief nearly buckled his knees. He built a fire fast, fingers numb but moving by memory. He wrapped her in his own coat, rubbing her arms, her legs, breathing warmth into her hands. He spoke to her softly. Words meant to guide spirits back into a body that had almost slipped away. The flames caught, crackling, and color slowly returned to her lips. Her eyelids fluttered. Pale blue eyes opened, unfocused, filled with pain and fear. Her lips moved, barely shaping sound. Lone Wolf leaned closer, thinking she was calling for someone else. For a husband or a god. "Lone Wolf," she whispered. The name struck him like an arrow. He pulled back, staring at her face, searching for recognition, memory, explanation. She tightened her fingers around his wrist with surprising strength, as if afraid he might vanish. "Don't leave," she breathed, her voice trembling like the ice behind them. The river creaked and shifted, warning of danger, but Lone Wolf was already lifting her into his arms. Whatever mystery bound them, whatever path had led her to speak his name at the edge of death, he knew this much: he would not leave her to the cold. He turned his back on the frozen river and carried her toward shelter, unaware that this moment would follow him for the rest of his life. Lone Wolf carried her through the low hills until the river's voice faded. Behind them, and the wind softened among juniper and stone. His arms ached, but he did not slow. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow, her body trembling against his chest. When he reached a shallow cave he sometimes used in storms, he laid her near the back and fed a fire until the space glowed with heat and smoke. Outside, snow began to fall again, thick and quiet, sealing them away from the world. He worked patiently, peeling the frozen dress from her body, replacing it with dry skins, warming water over the fire to wash the blue from her hands and feet. Her belly rose round and heavy beneath the blankets, the child inside her shifting as if protesting the cold it had survived. Lone Wolf felt a deep unease settle in him. This life depended on him now as much as the woman did. When she woke fully, she stared at the cave walls as though expecting them to vanish. Fear crossed her face, then confusion, then cautious relief as she focused on him. He stepped back, giving her space, and offered water. She drank slowly, hands shaking, eyes never leaving his. At last, in a voice raw from cold and terror, she told him her name was Eleanor. She spoke of a wagon train broken by winter, of men who argued and left, of a river that promised a crossing and nearly became a grave. She did not explain the bruises on her arms or the shadows in her eyes, and Lone Wolf did not press her. Among his people, pain was carried quietly until it chose to speak. Silence, too, was a kind of respect. As night deepened, her breathing changed. She stiffened, a sharp cry escaping her before she could stop it. Lone Wolf was at her side instantly, understanding even before she spoke. The child was coming. Too soon, too hard, but there was no turning back. He steadied her, guided her breathing, spoke low words meant to calm frightened spirits. Outside, the wind screamed, and the fire hissed as snow slipped through the cave mouth. Hours passed in a blur of pain and endurance. Eleanor clutched his arm, her strength surprising him, calling out in a mix of prayer and sobs. Lone Wolf sang softly, a birth song older than memory, his voice steady even as fear coiled in his chest. Then, at last, a thin cry cut through the storm. The baby emerged red and furious, alive. Eleanor collapsed back, tears streaming as laughter broke free from her chest. Lone Wolf wrapped the child carefully and placed him against his mother's heart. In that moment, as firelight danced over their faces, Lone Wolf felt the weight of his loneliness shift. He had not only saved a life, he had been claimed by it. Spring crept into the hills quietly, melting the last of winter's cruelty and loosening the frozen ground. Lone Wolf watched the land change as he always had. But now his days were shaped by softer sounds, the small cries of a newborn, the low murmur of a woman learning to breathe without fear. Eleanor grew stronger with each passing week, her face regaining color, her movements steadier as she learned the rhythms of survival beyond the river. The child slept close to the fire, swaddled in skins, his dark eyes already curious about the world that had nearly refused him. Lone Wolf hunted and gathered, returning each day to find Eleanor waiting, gratitude and uncertainty mixed in her gaze. They spoke little at first, relying on gestures and shared work. She learned to prepare meat, to read the sky, to recognize the warning signs of weather. He learned the fragile strength of her hands and the quiet courage it took for her to step into a life so different from the one she had known. At night, as the fire burned low, she told him stories of towns and railroads, of houses packed close together, of a world that never truly slept. He listened, trying to imagine such noise. The baby thrived. Eleanor named him Thomas, after a brother lost long ago, and Lone Wolf crafted a small cradle board from ash and sinew. When Eleanor tired, he carried the child on his back as he walked the hills, the steady rise and fall of his steps lulling the boy into sleep. With the weight of the child against him, Lone Wolf felt the land differently, as if each footstep mattered more than before. Yet the world beyond the hills did not disappear. Smoke from distant camps sometimes smudged the horizon, and Lone Wolf knew his people would come searching. Eleanor sensed it too, the way his eyes tracked every movement, the way he listened for hooves in the night. One evening, as the sun bled red into the prairie, they spoke of what must come. Eleanor understood she could not remain hidden forever, nor could Lone Wolf abandon his people without consequence. When the day arrived, he led her to the edge of the territory where traders sometimes passed. They waited in silence until riders appeared, small shapes growing clearer with each heartbeat. Eleanor held Thomas close, tears slipping down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead to Lone Wolf's chest, memorizing the strength beneath. He touched the child's tiny hand once, a simple blessing, and stepped back. As Eleanor rode away, Lone Wolf remained where he was, alone once more. But the loneliness no longer felt empty. It carried the knowledge that even the coldest river could be defied, and that some lives once saved would forever echo in his heart.